Hi, I'm USA Today bestselling author Jennifer Youngblood. Thanks for joining me for one chapter a day, The Clean Romance Way. Today, I'm going to be reading Chapter 7 of her Crazy Rich Fake Fiancé. Okay, Wyatt and Haven are officially in the quaint town of Remember, North Carolina. It seems like such a beautiful, magical place. I would love to go there. Let's see what happens. Chapter 7. I'm sorry, the sharp-featured, thin-faced man behind the counter said, his lips pulling down in a deep frown. We only have one room left, the honeymoon suite. Wyatt chuckled when he saw Bryn's distraught expression. She looked like a kid who had just learned that reindeer couldn't fly. We'll take it, he asserted. The man brightened, punching keys on his computer. Very good. We will? Bryn mouthed, eyes rounding. Wyatt slid an arm around Bryn's waist, pulling her closer. Don't worry, he whispered in her ear. I'll give you the bed and sleep on the couch. No funny business, I promise. She shook her head, smiling. You're funny, she said, but he could tell that she was relieved. There was a goodness and purity to Bryn that Wyatt didn't know existed until this trip. It made her even more attractive. Wyatt was an old-fashioned guy who believed in saving sexual intimacy until marriage. Even though he and Bryn had never discussed it, he got the feeling she felt the same way. It was refreshing, especially in New York City, where the idea of postponing intimacy was as foreign to people as the bygone era of horses and buggies. Wyatt still couldn't get over how different Bryn was from what he had thought. The more time he spent around her, the more he learned that the socialite party persona was a facade. He liked the real, approachable Bryn so much more. The man behind the desk got them checked in and handed Wyatt an old-fashioned brass key. Your room is on the second floor. Turn right when you get to the landing. The rooms are numbered, making it easy to find. Breakfast is held in the dining room from 6 to 10 a.m. He motioned. It's down the hall, the first door on the right. This evening in the dining room, we're serving complimentary apple cider and a selection of homemade cookies. Feel free to help yourselves. Thank you, Wyatt and Bryn replied in unison, then smiled at being on the same wavelength. Wyatt was struck by how beautiful Bryn was, with her delicately sculptured features and dark, soulful eyes rimmed with thick lashes. Her gleaming hair picked up the lights from the jeweled chandelier overhead. Wyatt watched as Bryn's gaze swept over the foyer, which looked exactly as Wyatt expected. The aged wood plank floors had creaked out a welcome under their feet as they walked in. The ceilings were high with detailed molding that glistened like fresh milk. Wyatt looked past the foyer to the curved wooden staircase that in and of itself was magnificent. Deep red wallpaper with a faint floral pattern covered the walls, looking festive against the swags of garland and berries. When they stepped into their room, Bryn's jaw dropped. A startled laugh gurgled in Wyatt's throat. The bed was heart-shaped with a bright red bedspread and white pillows. The wallpaper was done in hearts of various sizes and shapes. The furniture was white with red knobs in the shape of flowers. A white ceramic statue of Cupid, dusted with glitter, sat atop the dresser. Beside it was a vase of pink and red roses. There was a pink, white, and red plaid couch, which would be Wyatt's bed for the night. He walked over and deposited his duffel bag beside the couch. Bryn stepped into the bathroom. A second later, he heard peals of laughter. What? He asked, walking that direction. When he reached the bathroom, he stopped in his tracks. There was an old-fashioned clawfoot tub. A plastic shower curtain hung from a metal frame, a makeshift setup at best. With his height, taking a shower in the tub would be a challenge. Draped over the edge of the tub were red towels embroidered with white hearts. On the sink, there were 3 heart-shaped soaps stacked in a pyramid formation on a dish. The floor was black and white checkered tile. 2 red fluffy shag rugs covered the floor, and the toilet lid was encased in a red fuzzy cover. A collection of fabric hearts, the edges ruffled in white lace, hung on the walls. Wow, he breathed. Bryn turned to him, eyes swirling with amusement. This is really something. There aren't words, he said dourly. Well, she sighed, exiting the bathroom, this is definitely much more interesting than a plain old hotel room. He followed on her heels. Do you want me to find us another place to stay? His eyes swept over the room. I wanted something different, something quaint, not a freak show. She laughed. It's perfect. His spirits lifted as he cocked his head. Really? Really, she said firmly. She plopped down on the bed and stretched out her legs, putting her hands underneath her head. Then Bryn began giggling. "What?" "Look up." She pointed at the ceiling. There was a large mirror over the bed. For a second, he just gawked at it, then started laughing. "This is the most ridiculous room I've ever seen. I'm sorry I got us in this situation." She sat up, tucking her hair behind her ears. He sat down on the edge of the bed. Bryn raised her eyebrows, her forehead wrinkling. "It's an adventure, right?" "Something like that," he chuckled under his breath. He appreciated Bryn having a good attitude. The last thing Wyatt wanted was to make her feel uncomfortable with their sleeping arrangements. He looked at her full persimmon-colored lips, wanting more than anything to kiss her. But how could he? In this outlandish room that screamed tawdry? No way. He cleared his throat to push aside his discomfort. "Would you like to go down to the dining room and get some cider and cookies?" "I thought you'd never ask," she said, hopping off the bed. He bit back a smile. Bryn didn't seem bothered at all by the room. On the contrary, she found it amusing. If she didn't mind staying in this room, then he shouldn't let it get to him. He stood relieved. "Let's do it." There were several people in the dining room, including a few couples. However, it didn't feel crowded. "Wow, look at that." Bryn pointed at the centerpiece on the long mahogany table. 3 fat red candles sat amidst greenery and ribbons. Wyatt couldn't hold back a smile. Yeah, he found HGTV oddly entertaining, but he normally didn't pay attention to decorations. Bryn, however, was eating it up like a kid in a candy store, her eyes devouring every detail of the room. "Look!" She pointed to the large beveled glass windows and panels of stained glass at the top. He grinned. "It's nice." Her face fell. "I'm boring you stiff, aren't I?" "No, on the contrary, I think it's charming that you find so much pleasure in simple things." She tipped her head in surprise. "Well, I was just thinking the same thing about you earlier." "Really?" "Yeah, really," she laughed. "With the grapes." "See, we're a match made in heaven," he declared, his eyes holding hers. The flush in her cheeks emphasized her beauty. He draped an arm around her shoulders and motioned with the other hand. "Shall we get something to eat?" "Yes." "Lead the way." She stepped forward as they meandered through the people, smiling and nodding. They made their way over to the antique buffet table laden with cookies and a silver container of cider. When they'd filled their plates, they looked around for a place to sit. Wyatt pointed to a table with 2 empty seats. They sat down and began eating. The food was excellent. "Hello," a cheery voice said. "Hello," Bryn replied, offering a polite smile. Wyatt looked at the elderly lady sitting beside Bryn. She had carrot red hair with set curls like she'd removed the curlers and forgot to brush it out afterwards. She was thickly set with a full round face and heavy makeup. She had on a Christmas sweater and large red teardrop sapphire earrings. The woman smiled warmly. "I'm Lillian." "I'm Bryn, and this is Wyatt." "Nice to meet you both," Lillian said. Normally, Wyatt didn't mind small talk. He enjoyed getting to know his patients and took an interest in their lives. Tonight, however, he selfishly wanted Bryn Haven all to himself. Then again, they were surrounded by other travelers and obligated to exchange pleasantries while they nibbled on cookies and sipped cider. At least there was a roaring fire in the fireplace, making the room cozy. For a second, he let his mind get lost in the rhythm of the liquid, amber flames as they licked at the wooden logs, crackling in protest. He relaxed in his seat, settling in for what was sure to be a long conversation. He could tell the woman was keenly interested in talking to Bryn. He took a large bite of a chocolate chip cookie, appreciating the warm gooiness melting in his mouth. Next, he tried the crisp sugar cookie decorated with green and red sprinkles. It was also delicious. He washed it down with a swallow of tangy cider. "Is this your first time at the inn?" Lillian asked. "Yes," Bryn answered. She lifted a cookie to her mouth and took a dainty bite. "Well, what do you think of it?" Bryn chewed and swallowed. "It's incredible," she breathed reverently, her gaze sweeping over the room. A broad smile filled Lillian's face. "I think so, too." "Is this your first time here?" Bryn asked. Wyatt marveled at Bryn's kind tone. She sounded genuinely interested in talking to a stranger whom she'd probably never meet again. That was the mark of a good person, how they treated strangers and children. Bryn scored off the charts in both categories. Wyatt had been impressed last night with how kind and attentive she was to the lost girl during caroling. She wasn't haughty or consumed with herself. The media had certainly pegged Bryn wrong, as had he. Wyatt was glad to get a chance to see this side of her. Lillian waved a hand. "I've been coming here for years." Her voice grew nostalgic. "I met my husband Howard here. Today is our 45th wedding anniversary." "Congratulations," Bryn said heartily. "That's impressive," Wyatt agreed, becoming more interested in the conversation. "These days, it's not often that you see such a long, abiding relationship." Bryn caught his eyes, giving him an appreciative smile. "Yes, it is impressive," she said softly. Wyatt got the feeling that he'd be content to spend the rest of his life with Bryn. The notion surprised him, startled him a little. He'd dated scores of girls, but never felt his relationships had that longed-for, lasting quality. He smiled, catching a whiff of pine in the air, mingled with the scent of fresh cranberries and cinnamon. A shadow crossed Lillian's features. "Thank you." Tears misted her eyes. "Howard and I truly loved each other." She hesitated, her jaw working. "Today is bittersweet. Howard died 10 years ago." A sad smile touched her lips. "I've come here every year on this day." Wyatt felt guilty that he begrudged Lillian's attempt to engage Bryn in conversation. The poor woman was alone and suffering. Bryn placed a hand over Lillian's. "It must be hard for you," she said, compassion sounding in her voice. Lillian looked grateful. "Yes." She coughed to clear her throat. Then she forced a smile. "It is hard." Her eyes glowed with an inner light beneath her diamond-coated glasses. "But I wouldn't dream of not coming here. It's my time to remember Howard, to remember the wonderful times we had together." She laughed to herself. To most people, Howard was serious and stern, consumed with his work. But with me, he was different. Every Christmas Eve, he would give me a dozen red roses. We'd get dressed up in our nicest clothes and go out for a quaint dinner. We'd stop by the church to watch the Christmas pageant. Then we'd go home and dance. She smiled. "Howard and I loved to dance." "That's so romantic," Bryn said wistfully. "Yes, it was," Lillian agreed. "I'm sorry to go on about me," she said absently, shifting in her seat. She offered a graceful smile. "Thanks for listening." "Of course," Bryn nodded. Lillian turned her attention to Bryn and Wyatt. "What brings you to the inn?" Wyatt was the first to answer. "Oh, just passing through on our way to Atlanta." Interest lit Lillian's eyes. "Are you going to visit family?" "Yes, my parents and sisters." He draped an arm around Bryn's shoulders. His heart caught when she looked at him and smiled. A moment passed between them. "Bryn's meeting my family for the first time," he added, getting the feeling that this Christmas would be the first of many with her by his side. "You're very much in love," Lillian proclaimed. "I can tell." Bryn's eyes went wide, and she looked like she was about to protest. Wyatt pulled her closer. "Yes, we are." He didn't know what had gotten into him to be so presumptuous and bold. Maybe it was being here in this charming place. Maybe it was hearing Lillian's story about the long-abiding love she had for her deceased husband. Maybe it was the current that ran between him and Bryn every time their eyes locked. All Wyatt knew was that whatever was happening would change things from here on out. He didn't know how he knew, but that's what his gut told him, and he'd learned to listen to it. Bryn's eyes met his in a question. He chuckled. "I suppose I'm rushing things," he admitted to put her at ease. "In a way, our relationship is just getting started." "Yes," Bryn said, relaxing. A gleaming smile spread over Lillian's lips. "Just like me and Howard." She brought her hands together. "I can't think of a better place for you to start your relationship." She raised her glass of cider. "Here's to a new beginning. May you both have a wonderful, blessed relationship that will stand the test of time." "Thank you," they both said, lifting their glasses and clinking them together. "I'm sorry to monopolize your evening," Lillian said a minute later. "No, we've enjoyed talking to you," Wyatt countered, realizing that he meant every word. "Thank you." There seemed to be an air of mystery surrounding Lillian as her perceptive eyes looked over them one at a time. "I hope you have a Merry Christmas that brings you happiness and love." An unexpected feeling of warmth flooded Wyatt's chest. He looked at Bryn, whose eyes were teary. He placed a hand over hers and squeezed it. She turned over her hand and linked her fingers through his. A sense of completeness settled over them. Lillian scooted back her chair. "Well, it's time for me to turn in for the evening." She reached for a cane propped against the empty chair beside her. A wave of compassion went through Wyatt as Lillian held onto the table. With some effort, she got to her feet and clutched the cane. Wyatt scooted back his chair and got to his feet. "Here, let me help." He went around to her side. "Thank you," Lillian said, "but I can manage." She flashed a warm smile. "It was so nice meeting you both. You made my evening." Bryn stood. "Likewise." They watched as she shuffled from the room, limping as she went. Wyatt wished she were his patient so he could treat her. By silent assent, they both sat back down. "She seems like a nice lady," Bryn said. "Yes." Bryn tipped her head, a bemused smile crossing her lips. "So, what's this about our relationship?" His pulse picked up several notches as he took hold of her hands, gazing into her eyes. "Ever since we've been on this trip, something has changed. We've changed," he added. She gave him a radiant smile that melted his insides. "Yes." His throat tightened as he coughed. "In the spirit of starting over, I figure we should call things as they are, us as an official couple." "I'd like that," she said softly, her gaze holding his. A feeling of triumph raced through him. "You would?" "Yes." Hope shined in her eyes, and he felt deliriously happy. Then her eyes clouded. "What's wrong?" His heart clutched as he touched her cheek. "Nothing." She smiled, but he got the feeling it was forced. "Haven," he asked, using her nickname. "Do you want us to be together?" He held his breath, awaiting her response. "Yes," she exclaimed, "more than anything." The longing in her expression struck a chord deep inside him. "Then what is it?" he implored, searching her beautiful face. "I was just thinking how sad it is that Lillian's alone." He felt there was more to it than that, but maybe he was looking beyond the mark. "Yeah, I feel for her too. I hope she'll be able to find some joy and peace this Christmas." "Me too." A comfortable silence stretched a few beats between them, each of them thinking about Lillian. A moment later, her eyes took on a teasing glint. "So, are you ready to go back to our room? Or is the decor still freaking you out?" He rocked back. "I wasn't freaked out." "Oh, yes, you were. That's why you were in such a hurry to come down here and have cookies and cider." He laughed. "Was it that obvious?" He pulled a face. "I'm afraid I'll have to turn in my man card if I spend too much time in that ridiculous room." She grinned. "Aw, you'll be all right, tough guy." She glanced around. "I'm glad we came down here. This place feels magical, and it was wonderful meeting Lillian." "Yeah." He crooked a smile. "If we ever see her again, I owe her a great debt of thanks." "Oh, for what?" "For giving me an opening to make my intentions known, to tell you how extraordinary you are." He trailed a finger down a lock of her smooth, silky hair. "And to tell you that I'm having a fantastic time with you, freak showroom and all. I have a good feeling about this, about us." "Me too." He motioned with his head. "Shall we go?" "Yes." He took her hand and led her out of the room. Anticipation hummed between them as they ascended the stairs. When they'd stepped into the room and closed the door, Wyatt gathered Bryn into his arms as his gaze took in her exquisite features. A quiver of desire ran through him when he saw the smolder in her liquid chocolate eyes. His mouth coaxingly met hers as he drew in her sweetness. Their kiss deepened, causing wild, visceral swirls as their lips moved together. It wasn't just physical attraction, but the soldering of two travel-weary hearts and souls coming to a wonderful, unexpected home. They'd never be lonely or cold again. "That was amazing," Wyatt whispered when their lips pulled apart. Tenderly, he stroked her cheek. "You're amazing," she affirmed, an immeasurable depth of feeling in her mesmerizing eyes. "My haven," he whispered, as his lips covered hers once more. Okay, things are taking a serious turn for Wyatt and Haven. When is she going to tell him the truth? The longer she goes without telling him, the harder it's going to be. What did you think of the ridiculous honeymoon suite? I got a chuckle out of that, especially considering how uncomfortable Wyatt was about him. That was kind of funny. Lillian seems like a nice lady. That was sad about her losing her husband, Howard. It's bittersweet that she comes to the inn every year to celebrate their anniversary and to celebrate their relationship. Okay, we're going to have to see what happens next. I'm excited, but we'll have to wait until tomorrow. So join me then. I'll be reading the next chapter. Here's to keeping it sweet and swoony. See y'all tomorrow.